My husband told me I was imagining things for 2 years. Then I found the folder on his laptop labeled Just Work Stuff. The folder was right there in the middle of his desktop, between a QuickBooks shortcut and a PDF he'd been meaning to read since 2021. Just Work Stuff. I almost didn't click it. That's the part I keep coming back to, how close I came to closing the laptop and going back to bed. It was 11:52 p.m. on a Wednesday. I had a headache. I'd only opened the laptop because mine was dead, and I needed to check whether my dentist appointment was Thursday or Friday. I was going to be in and out in 45 seconds. The folder had 214 items in it. I know that number because I looked at it for a long time before I clicked anything. Just sat there in the dark of our kitchen, in the house we'd bought together, with the baby monitor on the counter putting out its soft, static hum from our daughter's room, reading the number 214 in small gray text beneath the folder icon. 214 items labeled Just Work Stuff. My husband is a mid-level project coordinator at a regional logistics firm. He does not have 214 items of work stuff. He barely talks about work at all. I clicked it. The first thing I saw was a photograph. I'm not going to describe the photograph in detail. I'll tell you it was a woman. I'll tell you it wasn't me. I'll tell you it was the kind of photograph that is not taken accidentally and is not kept for professional reasons and does not belong in a folder on a family laptop between a QuickBooks shortcut and an unread PDF. I sat in my kitchen until 2 a.m. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I'd always assumed in the abstract hypothetical way that married people sometimes imagine catastrophe before it arrives, that this was the kind of thing you cried about immediately. Instead, I felt something cold and very specific move through me, starting somewhere in my chest and spreading outward, until I was sitting completely still in a kitchen that suddenly looked like a set from a movie about someone else's life. I thought about the last 2 years. Then I closed the laptop very carefully, went upstairs, got into bed next to my husband, and stared at the ceiling until 4:30 a.m. I did not sleep. I was not going to make a single move until I knew exactly what I was looking at. My name is Rachel. I'm 34 years old. I'm a high school English teacher, AP Literature and Junior Composition, and I have been teaching at Westbrook High in suburban Charlotte for 8 years. I am good at my job. I am good at it because I am patient and precise, and because I have spent a significant portion of my adult life learning to read things carefully, to look at a text, and find the thing beneath the surface that the author either intended or failed to conceal. I had apparently not been applying those skills to my marriage. His name is Owen. We met when I was 26 at a mutual friend's birthday party, and he was exactly the kind of person I would have written as a love interest for a YA novel. Easy smile, good stories, the specific quality of attention that makes you feel, when he's talking to you, like you are the most interesting person in the room. We dated for 2 years. We got married in September 2018, outdoors, at a vineyard in the Yadkin Valley, in a ceremony that my mother still talks about. Our daughter, Cleo, was born in 2021. She is 3 years old, and she calls Owen Daddy-O, and she has his eyes and my stubbornness, and she is the best thing that has ever happened to me in a life that has had some genuinely good things in it. The first sign, the first one I noticed anyway, though I've since reconstructed earlier ones I explained away, was a Thursday night in early 2022. Owen came home from drinks with the team at 11:30 p.m., smelling like a specific perfume that was not mine. I noticed it. I sat with it. I told myself, in the way you tell yourself things when the alternative is too large to look at directly, that it was probably someone he'd hugged hello, or someone who'd sat next to him in a booth, or any number of incidental explanations that are technically possible and psychologically convenient. I mentioned it, casually, not accusatorially. "You smell like perfume," I said, and I watched his face. And his face did something that I cataloged at the time as mild surprise and have since reclassified. "Jen from accounting," he said without pausing. "She's a hugger. You've met her." I had met her. I thought about Jen from accounting for about a week. Then I stopped, because I had a 4-month-old and 47 AP Lit essays to grade, and the specific exhaustion of a person keeping multiple complex systems running simultaneously, and the mental energy required to pursue the perfume question was energy I did not have. The second sign was a phone, face down. Owen had always been a phone face-up person. I know that sounds like a minor thing, and it is a minor thing, which is why I noticed it, because minor changes in behavior are the kind of thing that registers without quite surfacing. The way you notice a picture is slightly crooked without being able to say exactly when it moved. Sometime around mid-2022, his phone started living face down, on the kitchen counter, on the coffee table, on the nightstand, always face down. I mentioned this too. He said the screen bothered him at night, which was the kind of answer that is just plausible enough to close the conversation without resolving it. The third sign was the working late. Owen had never been a working late person. His job, project coordination at a regional logistics firm called Centra Supply, not a particularly glamorous operation, had always been reliably 9 to 5, occasionally 9 to 6. Never the kind of thing that required regular late evenings. Starting in the fall of 2022, he began coming home at 7:30, 8 Moi twice in 1 week at 9 p.m. Quarter end, he said, new client, rollout issues, all reasonable, all uncheckable without the kind of surveillance that makes you feel like a person you don't want to be. So I didn't check. I managed my doubt the way you manage something you don't want to look at. I put it in a box, put the box on a high shelf, and got on with the business of being a mother and a teacher and a wife. And then I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. That's the part that I want to be very precise about, because I think it's the part that matters most. And I think it's the part that people who haven't experienced it can't quite fully understand. The gaslighting, I'm using that word deliberately and accurately, not loosely, didn't happen in dramatic declarations. It happened in small increments, over time, in the specific way that water reshapes stone, not through force, but through patience and repetition. It started with the perfume. When I brought it up a second time, not that night, but later, in a conversation that had gotten heated about something unrelated and then veered into the territory I'd been avoiding, Owen looked at me with an expression of such calm concern that I almost believed what he said next. Rach, he said, I'm worried about you. Not you're wrong. Not that's ridiculous. I'm worried about you. As if my noticing a thing was itself the problem to be addressed. He said he'd been noticing that I seemed anxious, that I'd been reading into things, that the first year of parenthood had been hard on me, which it had, which was true, and which he used as scaffolding for everything that followed. Your mom said the same thing, he added, which, I later found out, was a conversation he had quietly engineered by calling my mother and expressing concern about my stress levels in a way that planted exactly the seed he needed. My mother called me the following week and asked if I was doing okay. Owen seems worried about you, she said. I felt the ground shift slightly under my feet. Not dramatically, just slightly, the way it does in the very early stages of an earthquake, when you're not sure if you felt something or imagined it. I told her I was fine. Over the following months, this pattern repeated in variations. I noticed something. I mentioned it. Owen responded not with denial but with gentle redirection, toward my mental state, my stress, my tendency to catastrophize, a phrase he introduced around month 4, and deployed regularly thereafter. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Anita Rao, licensed clinical psychologist, 12 years in practice, not because I thought I needed one, but because Owen had suggested it so consistently that I'd begun to absorb his concern as my own. Dr. Rao is important to this story. I'll come back to her. The effect of all this, over 2 years, was a gradual erosion of my confidence in my own perceptions. Not complete erosion. I'm a stubborn person, and I have a certain baseline resistance to being told that what I experienced isn't real, but enough that I had learned to add a qualifier to every instinct. I think I noticed something, but I've been stressed. I think something is off, but maybe I'm reading into it. I think my marriage is in trouble, but Owen says I catastrophize. 2 years of that, and then a folder on a laptop. 214 items. I spent 4 days not acting. This sounds passive. It was not passive. I was building a picture, quietly and carefully, in the way I'd learned over years of teaching students to annotate a text. Not to react to the first thing that jumps out, but to read the whole thing before you decide what it means. I went back to the laptop 3 times while Owen was at work. I was methodical. I took photographs of the folder contents with my phone, not of the explicit images, which I did not need documentation of, but of the names. The file names told a story that was worse in some ways than the images themselves. There were names, first names, I'm not going to write them here, repeated consistently across 3 years of file history. Not one person. 3. There were dates embedded in the file metadata. There were screenshots of text I wasn't supposed to see, saved in that folder the way someone saves something they want to keep. The oldest file was dated September 2019. We had been married for exactly 1 month in September 2019. I sat with that number for a long time. 1 month. He had not made it 1 month. The folder on my phone contained 47 photographs by the end of day 4. I backed them up to a Google Drive folder I created on my school email account, not our shared family account, my school one, which Owen had no access to, and I made a secondary backup on a USB drive I kept in my classroom desk. Then I called my friend Diane. Diane Chen has been my best friend since college. She is a paralegal at a family law firm in Charlotte. Not an attorney herself, but someone who has spent 11 years watching how these cases move, what evidence matters, what mistakes people make in the first 72 hours after they find out. She is the person I should have called the night I found the folder. Instead, I waited 4 days, because I needed to be sure. And then I called her from my car in the Westbrook High parking lot during my prep period. She picked up. I told her. I listened to her breathing change. Are you somewhere private? She said. Yes. How much did you document? 47 photographs. File metadata, dates, names, 3 years of history. A pause. Okay, she said. Good. Don't touch the laptop again. Don't confront him. Don't change anything in the house. And call Ellen Marsh today. Ellen Marsh is a family law attorney. Diane had given me her name once, in the casual way you give someone the name of a good doctor, just in case, not because you think you'll need it. I had stored the name in my phone with no context 2 years ago, in a moment when I'd been more worried than I'd admitted to anyone. I called Ellen Marsh that afternoon. Ellen Marsh has been practicing family law in Mecklenburg County for 16 years. She is a small woman with very precise diction, and the specific quality of stillness that I associate with people who have heard every version of every terrible thing, and have learned not to register surprise. She saw me 2 days after I called, in her office on South Tryon Street, in a room with good light and a box of tissues on the table that I did not use. I laid out everything: the folder, the dates, the names, the 2 years of gaslighting. I showed her the photographs on my phone, and I watched her look at them without expression. You said the oldest file dates to September 2019, she said, 1 month after our wedding. She wrote something down. And you have documentation of the gaslighting? Anything in writing? I thought about it. He texted me once. I'd confronted him about coming home late, and he texted me afterward saying he was concerned about my pattern of unfounded accusations. I have that. She wrote that down too. And you're still in the house together? Yes. I haven't changed anything. Diane told me not to. Ellen nodded. Good. Here's where we are. She explained it the way a good attorney explains things. Clearly, without softening, without cruelty. The marriage was likely over. That was my call, not hers. But based on what I described, I should prepare for that. Given that there was a child, a custody arrangement would be the central legal question. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, meaning marital assets are divided fairly, not equally, and the length and conduct of the marriage are relevant factors. Adultery, while not criminally actionable, is relevant to certain financial determinations in NC divorce law. The documentation you have is valuable, she said. We'll want it properly preserved. I'm going to refer you to a digital forensics consultant who can create a legally defensible copy of the laptop contents if we determine that's the route we take. I want it preserved, I said. She looked at me. Are you sure you want to proceed? This will be difficult. I've been living in difficult for 2 years, I said. At least now I know what shape it is. The digital forensics consultant was named James Kowalski, and he had spent 20 years in IT security before pivoting to private consulting, mostly for family law cases. He was methodical, bearded, spoke in short declarative sentences, and treated my USB backup with the careful attention of someone who understood that what they were handling mattered. He created a forensic image of the drive contents, with full metadata preservation and a chain of custody document, within a week of our first meeting. The file dates are clean, he told me, when he delivered the report. No evidence of post-creation modification. These were created when they appear to have been created. I asked him what the oldest confirmed file date was. He checked his report. September 14th, 2019. Our wedding had been September 7th, 7 days. He had not made it 7 days. I went back to Dr. Rao. I had been seeing her on and off for 18 months, originally because Owen had suggested it, and eventually because I'd decided I wanted to keep going for my own reasons. And I sat in her office on a Thursday afternoon and I told her everything. I watched her face change. Not dramatically, because she's a therapist, and therapists are trained not to let their faces change dramatically, but in the small, controlled ways that tell you something has shifted. Can I ask you something? She said when I finished. Yes. Over the time we've been working together, the anxiety you've described, the self-doubt, the sense that your perceptions might be unreliable, do you think any of that was internally generated? Or does it feel, in retrospect, like something that was introduced? I'd thought about this. I think I had anxiety before. I think that anxiety was a foundation, and I think he built on it. She was quiet for a moment. That's a very clear-eyed assessment. I teach literature, I said. I know how a reliable narrator gets made unreliable. She wrote me a clinical summary, not a diagnosis, she was careful to clarify, but a documented account of the self-doubt and eroded confidence I'd presented with across our sessions, contextualized by what I'd just disclosed. Ellen Marsh had asked for any documentation of the psychological impact. Dr. Rao's summary was 3 pages long. I read it in my car, and I had to sit there for a few minutes because reading it, in her words, the clinical precision of it, patient presented with persistent self-doubt disproportionate to described circumstances, repeatedly questioning own perceptions in contexts where doubt was later confirmed to be externally imposed, hit differently than living it had. Living it had felt like personal failure. Seeing it documented felt like evidence. It was evidence. I had been planning to wait. That was my original strategy. Build the full legal picture, file quietly, serve him papers before he had any idea what was coming. Ellen had advised this as the cleanest path, the one that minimized conflict and maximized my legal position. Then Owen changed the timeline. It was a Saturday morning. Cleo was at my mother's for the weekend. Owen and I were in the kitchen. He was making coffee. I was grading papers at the table, maintaining the careful normalcy I'd been sustaining for 2 weeks. And he sat down across from me and said, "I want to talk about something." My pen stopped moving, something in his voice. "I've been offered a position," he said, "in Denver. Centra is expanding their Western operations and they want me to lead the new office." I looked up from my papers. "It's a significant step up," he said. "Better title, better salary. The thing is, they need an answer by next Friday, and I'd need to start in 6 weeks." He looked at me with the expression of someone sharing exciting news. And underneath it, I'd learned to read underneath by then, was something else. Relief, maybe. The specific relief of a person who has found an exit and is preparing to use it. "What do you think?" he said. I thought, he's leaving. Not we're moving. He's leaving. The job offer may or may not be real. What's real is that he's constructed a reason to put geography between us, between himself and whatever is in that laptop folder, before anything surfaces. "I need a few days," I said, "to think about it." "Of course," he said. I called Ellen that afternoon. "How fast can we move?" I said. "How fast do you need?" "He's trying to get to Denver before we get to court." There was a beat. "Come in Monday," she said. "We'll file Tuesday." I'm going to compress what happened next, because the legal mechanics are long and not the point, and also because I have a daughter who will someday be old enough to search her parents' names online, and I am choosing, deliberately, to leave her a version of this story that doesn't weaponize detail. Here is what happened. Owen was served on a Tuesday morning at 9:15 a.m. at the Centra Supply offices by a process server named Robert Keating. I know the time because Ellen's assistant texted me when it was confirmed. I was standing in front of my AP Lit class at that moment, discussing the reliability of Nick Carraway as a narrator, and I will never fully separate those two things in my memory. He called me 11 times between 9:15 and 11:00 a.m. I let every call go to voicemail. My attorney had advised me not to engage directly, and I had decided to trust my attorney on this. He came home that afternoon. I was not there. I had arranged to stay at Diane's, and when he realized I wasn't there, he called again. I listened to that voicemail once, and then sent the recording to Ellen, because the content was relevant to what would follow. The discovery process, the formal legal exchange of documents and evidence, took 4 months. James Kowalski's forensic report was submitted as Exhibit C in the discovery package. Dr. Rao's clinical summary was Exhibit F. The text in which Owen had described my concerns as a pattern of unfounded accusations was Exhibit H. Owen's attorney, a man named Derek Vale, 9 years in family law, younger than I'd expected. Slightly overconfident in a way that I watched Ellen dismantle with the patience of someone who had been doing this for 16 years, attempted to characterize my documentation as an invasion of privacy, collected through unauthorized access to shared marital property. Ellen pointed out, with the measured tone of someone who finds the opposing argument mildly amusing, that a shared family laptop is, in fact, shared marital property, to which both parties have access, and that the contents of the folder had been stored there voluntarily. Derek Vale did not push that argument further. The Denver position, it turned out, was real. Owen had applied without telling me 4 months before he mentioned it in the kitchen. The timeline was established through discovery documents that his employer was legally required to provide. He had been planning his exit for longer than the conversation in the kitchen had suggested. I found that clarifying, actually. It confirmed something I'd begun to suspect, that the 2 years of gaslighting had not been the accidental byproduct of a man trying to manage his own guilt. It had been a calculated strategy to keep me doubting myself long enough for him to arrange a clean departure. He'd needed me uncertain. He'd needed me to believe that my perceptions were the problem, because as long as I believed that, I wasn't building a legal case. I had been building one for 16 days by the time he mentioned Denver. The divorce was finalized 8 months after I found the folder. Primary custody of Cleo, me. Owen has visitation, scheduled, documented, supervised for the first 6 months at his own legal expense, following a recommendation from the guardian ad litem assigned to Cleo's case, a woman named Patricia Simmons, who had been doing this work for 23 years, and whose assessment of Owen's credibility and character was 3 pages long and not flattering. The marital home, mine, with a buyout of Owen's equity from a refinancing. We had bought it together. I had found the neighborhood, negotiated the offer, managed the renovation. I had planted the garden in the backyard that Cleo calls the flower place. I was not leaving. Owen took the Denver job. The day I got the final decree from Ellen, I texted Diane. Just 2 words. It's done. She called me immediately and we talked for 2 hours, and she cried more than I did, which is very on brand for her, and I am grateful for her every single day. The piece about Dr. Rao, I want to tell you, because it matters and because I think it's the thing I most want people who are in the middle of it, in that fog of self-doubt, wondering if they're catastrophizing, wondering if the thing they're sensing is real or invented, to hear. On my last session with her, after the decree, I asked her something I'd been turning over for months. Do you think I was crazy? I said, during the time I was coming to you. Do you think any of it was real? The anxiety, the catastrophizing, or was it all him? She looked at me for a moment. Both are true, she said. You had anxiety. It was real, and he used it against you. Both things can be true simultaneously. How do I know which is which? You probably can't, completely. But here's what I noticed. From the moment you came in with certainty, with the folder, with the evidence, your symptoms changed. Almost immediately. The self-doubt dropped. The hypervigilance dropped. The, am I imagining this, dropped. She paused. That tells you something. Anxiety rooted in real threat resolves when the threat is named. Anxiety that's been manufactured doesn't have a real source to resolve. Yours had a real source. I've thought about that a lot. I think she's right. The fog lifted almost immediately. Not the pain. The pain was real and it took time and it's still there in places, around the edges. But the specific fog of not trusting myself, that went quickly because it had never been mine. It's been 14 months. Cleo calls Owen on Tuesdays and Thursdays on a schedule. She is adjusting in the way that 3-year-olds adjust to things, with the flexibility and the occasional emotional weather system of someone whose world is still mostly made of feeling and who is surrounded by people making sure that feeling is mostly safe. She is doing okay. She asks me sometimes where Daddy lives now, and I tell her Denver, far away. And she says, like an airplane? And I say yes, like an airplane. And she says, can we have waffles? And we have waffles. My classroom is on the 2nd floor of Westbrook High, east-facing, and in the mornings in October, the light comes through at an angle that turns everything gold. I am teaching Beloved this semester to my AP class, and last week we talked about memory, about what we choose to carry and what we learn to set down. One of my students raised her hand and asked, how do you know which memories are true? Like, if someone keeps telling you your memory is wrong? The class looked at her. I looked at her. You trust the pattern, I said. Any single memory can be questioned. But if the pattern keeps pointing the same direction, if your gut keeps saying the same thing, even when someone is telling you it's not saying that, you learn to trust the pattern. She nodded. She wrote it down. I kept talking, but I was thinking, I should have said that to myself 2 years ago. I should have sat down in my kitchen with myself the way I sit down with my students and said, read the whole thing. Don't react to the one line they want you to react to. Read the whole thing and tell me what the pattern says. The pattern always knew. I just needed to learn to trust it. If you made it to the end, you already know what to do.